My name is Matt Kraft, and I am an associate professor of education and economics, and I've been here in the Department of Education for 9 years now. I received a very interdisciplinary training, and I tried to draw on that to study education from multiple lenses. In particular, I lean on economics as not only a discipline that provides a toolkit for causal inference through econometrics to study and evaluate education policy and practices to understand how those policies and practices affect inequality, but also to bring a lens for thinking about not only the benefits of a program, policy, or practice, but also its costs and how to weigh those when trying to make difficult trade-offs that policymakers face every day to address the glaring inequalities we know exist in our education system and society. I think the economics lenses and toolkits that I draw on also provide an advantageous way for thinking about opportunity costs and asking what are the potential status quo biases that exist around the inaction that we may see related to glaring inequities in education and society, and what are, importantly, the potential unintended consequences of well-intended efforts to address that inequality that we may have blind spots in our thinking about, that we hopefully can bring different ideas and models to bear to try to anticipate them and address them before we enact new policies and practices. So most of my work relates to questions of teacher effectiveness and the teacher labor market. Who wants to teach, and what are their experiences in schools? How does the school as an organization shape what's possible for them? That is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I started out as a tutor, and then a substitute teacher, and then a public school teacher. And now that's really the focus of my research. I deeply believe that, and have experienced in my own life, that teachers have the power to change people's lives. My great hope is that in some small way, the work I do and the work that so many other of my colleagues do can help us to support, enable, and equip teachers to do their best work and to attract the brilliant minds and inspiring individuals that we need in classrooms across the United States. The work I do relates directly to addressing inequality in our public education system here in the United States. To give you some examples, I've done work that tries to highlight the challenges of urban public schools that often serve large proportions of students from low-income backgrounds and students of color, and that in these schools we see high turnover rates, but that is predominantly driven by the challenging working conditions that teachers in those schools often face, a lack of strong leadership and material resources, and the types of interpersonal opportunities to collaborate with your colleagues and work in a team to take on the challenges of helping every student reach their fullest potential. And that we need to think about ways in which we can create organizational practices that support teachers to do their best work in those environments, to serve students and address inequality. Similarly, I study teacher layoffs, which is a polemic and difficult topic, but one that is incredibly important for thinking about equity and inequality, because layoffs, as work that I and my colleagues have shown, fall disproportionately when they happen on both teachers of color and often students of color and students from low-income backgrounds. And the policies that we choose to govern and guide how we implement layoffs have very important implications for educational equity and access to high-quality teachers. But the project I want to highlight most is a recent study to try to understand the ways in which teachers impact students as natural mentors, as someone who develops a caring relationship that goes beyond the types of traditional pedagogical teaching and classroom work to being a role model, being a social support. And it turns out that over 15% of adolescents identify a teacher in their K-12 experience as the most impactful natural mentor that they've had in their life. And I think many of us can relate to that. And what we found in that research is that students of color and students from low-income backgrounds are less likely to report having had a teacher who was a close natural mentor compared to white students and more affluent students. And so I think that highlights this inequitable access and speaks to the importance of diversifying the teacher workforce, because we know that shared common backgrounds are one of the ways in which these natural relationships often form. But also encouragingly, when we analyzed a rich longitudinal nationally representative data set, trying to drill down and really understand what's the causal impact of having a natural mentor as a teacher, we had to identify, well, how does that happen and what might be a way to really tease apart cause and effect. And what we did is we compared twins, one of whom it reported having a natural mentor and the other who didn't, who were attending the same schools, and compared their outcomes. We also compared best friends. With that contrast, we compared even romantic partners in high school, as well as looking at changes in students' academic performance kind of before they met their natural mentor and after. And across all of those different ways to try to deal with the different selection challenges, we find really compelling and consistent evidence that not only does having a natural mentor as a teacher benefit students' academic achievement and longer-term attainment, but it seems to be most beneficial for students from low-income backgrounds and students of color. I think that offers a lot of hope and opportunity for us to create school environments where students feel like they belong and they have opportunities to get to know their teachers, coaches, and counselors. And there are things we can do, like smaller class sizes, that are not only beneficial pedagogically for teaching, but can foster these types of close relationships that go much beyond the classroom walls. As a teacher here at Brown, in my courses, I try to provide students with opportunities to apply what we're learning in practice. And so that gives us the opportunity to engage with not only research that I've done and my colleagues have done on these questions of education and equity and power and privilege and opportunity, but to do so in a way that directly speaks to policy and practice. So when I teach the economics of education, or I teach statistics or program evaluation or causal inference, we do so in a way where students have the opportunity to engage with polemic issues of the day, the types of questions we're grappling with in society and in our public schools, and do so in a way that brings to bear real data, and to use that data and analyze it and to write our findings and communicate them in an accessible way, but to also synthesize the available evidence and bring critical lenses to think about what are some of the blind spots in the research that's been done, and to map out potential new avenues of research and write policy memos that are what my students who come back and talk to me often tell me about is a skill that they end up using quite frequently in their own work out there as change agents in the world of education. And so I think this is a really important way in which education as a discipline bridges both theory and practice, and why it's just such a joy to teach here at Brown and in the Department of Education, because we're engaged in topics that matter for students today and shape the policy of tomorrow.